Hello and welcome to our podcast on script tools. These are some small, nuanced ways that screenwriters and directors help keep their movie plots clear to us in the audience. Let's see what we're talking about. So first off, we have to enter this conversation with the understanding that movie making is time intensive. Nobody just picks up a camera and says, hey, let's make Braveheart or Schindler's List or anything for that matter. A lot of time, effort, thinking, and planning goes into any movie making endeavor. And because it takes a lot of time, many scripts don't even make it to production. Hundreds of scripts are submitted to studios or to directors to be made, and most of them don't get very far. They're horrible ideas, they don't make sense, stuff like that. So, those few that do actually make it go through extensive revisions before they actually get to production. Many times, the items that help make these scripts clear are these items that we call script tools. And since they have been so well planned, items are well thought out. And pretty much everything is intentional. Except for the occasional continuity mistake, most things are very intentional. These script tools that filmmakers and screenwriters use help keep the scripts and therefore the plots very clear to the audiences. So the first script tool that we would talk about that's exceptionally important is the idea of a time crunch or an appointment. Basically, scripts need to give characters a deadline. Think about it for real people. If there isn't some sort of pressure on us to move forward in our lives, to improve ourselves, to accomplish goals, would we? Or would we spend a lot of our time sitting in our basement eating Cheetos while wearing sweatpants or something? So when screenwriters give characters time crunches or appointments, it puts pressure on them. It makes the plot move forward in a reasonable fashion. And these time crunches and appointments come in two forms. One is the time crunch. This is a pretty negative thing. Basically, characters need to do something or complete some task before a certain time, or else something bad will happen. Something could blow up, somebody could fly out of the country, a bad guy could get away. Something like that. We would call that a time crunch. Do it by this time, or else. Another more kind version of the time crunch is what we call just a basic appointment. Characters need to move forward. Something needs to propel them in this cause and effect of plot. So we will hear characters set appointments for things. Things like, hey, I'll see you tomorrow at the birthday party. Well, guess what we have to see as a scene? The birthday party. Or, you know what? At your doctor's appointment next Tuesday at 9 a.m., we'll take care of this. Guess which scene we have to see? That's right, the doctor's appointment at 9 a.m. If a character's going to say an appointment or some sort of do this or else, we have to see that happening. So a couple examples here from Star Wars Episode 4, the ending of that film, the rebels must destroy the Death Star before the rebel base is within firing range. And we have this primitive graphic during the movie of the Death Star moving around the planet and slowly lining up the rebel base on the other side. So basically, Luke Skywalker needs to get his torpedoes to blow up the Death Star before the Death Star blows up the rebel base. That is most definitely an example of a time crunch. Do this or else. Another example of a time crunch comes from The Hangover. The very beginning, all the guys go down to Vegas for a last night of bachelor party hangout before Doug gets married. Unfortunately, Doug turns up missing, and so the characters need to find him. Well, how badly do they need to find him? How quickly do they need to find him? The outline of the movie puts pressure on them. They must find him before the wedding, which is happening in so many hours. And so that time crunch of do this or else really propels the characters and propels the plot forward to put some pressure on the script. Another example of a script tool is the idea of a hook. These are the various ways that directors link shots together. They help move the story forward in a logical and reasonable progression. There are 4 common types of hooks: sound to sound, sound to image, image to image, and image to sound. So basically the point of a hook is this. We are watching a scene, something happening between characters. Things are happening, there is dialogue, there is acting going on. But then the director needs to cut to a new section of action. Now, rather than just jump to that is completely discombobulated and completely harsh, they may use one of these 4 types of hooks. So for example, a sound-to-sound hook might be when we have a character say, "Hey, let's go to Calcutta." So we hear them saying those words. But then all of a sudden we get to a new shot, new image of a city on screen, and we hear a character say, "Welcome to Calcutta." There's no confusion here. We know exactly where the characters are because the sound-to-sound hook connects those 2 scenes. Somebody says it, and then they show up in that same city. Another example comes from Harry Potter. Here we don't have dialogue making a sound-to-sound hook, we have a sound. In the beginning scene, Harry is being attacked by the Dementors, those things that suck life out of people. And as he's being attacked, he hears the sound of his mother screaming, this high-pitched scream. And then all of a sudden, the shot changes to Harry passed out. But the sound changes to that of a train whistle that sounds almost exactly like the sound of his mother screaming from before. So these 2 visual images are linked by sound. We hear the scream, and then we hear the train whistle. Since they sound almost exactly the same, we are to assume that these 2 shots are closely related. Another way we can link scenes is what we call sound to image. Perhaps in shot 1, we hear a character say something like, "We need more heat." And then all of a sudden in shot 2, we have the visual image of picking up a hairdryer. Well, hairdryers create heat. We know that these 2 are connected. Another example comes from Inception, where a character says, "Well, we need to find the forger." Well, he's in Mumbai. And then all of a sudden, the visual image of a city pops up. They don't tell us exactly where it is, but based on the theory of hooks, that city has to be Mumbai, because it's a sound to image hook. Somebody said he is in this city, so logically, the next image we see will be of that city. A third type of hook is what we call an image to image hook. And so the first one comes from National Treasure. And here we see a young boy on screen being told a story by his grandfather. And then all of a sudden, that close-up of the boy cuts to the close-up of a man driving a truck in a snowy environment. It is the visual image of a young boy to a visual image of an older man. We have to make the logical connection that those are the same character, just character as young boy and now character as older man. And the same goes in reverse in terms of a flashback, for example, from Forrest Gump. At the very beginning of Forrest Gump, Forrest is sitting on a bench waiting for a bus, and he's telling his story about how he remembers his first pair of shoes. He closes his eyes, he squinches up his face in thought, and then all of a sudden, we get another image on screen of a young boy with the same facial expression, the same eyes, the same costuming even. And so we are to infer that the Forrest Gump sitting on the bench is now being shown as a young Forrest Gump getting his first pair of magic shoes. Again, the point is an image-to-image hook helps link these scenes together. An image-to-sound hook is pretty rare. To talk through an example might be something like this, where on screen we have the visual image of a firing squad lining up to execute a prisoner. We see that happening. The rifles are all drawn. The condemned prisoner is over there. He's got his blindfold on and the cigarette hanging out of his mouth in stereotypical fashion. But then the next scene is black. But instead of seeing anything, we just hear a shot. We know what happened when the screen went dark. We know that the condemned prisoner was actually executed. We may not see it, but because we have gone from the image of the firing squad to just the sound of the firing squad, we know that those two scenes are linked by an image to sound hook. The third script tool that directors and filmmakers will use to help keep things straight is the idea of a sound bridge. And so this is somewhat similar to a hook, but we actually get more blending of things. Basically, we have two scenes visually that are going to be played back to back. At the same time, we have overlapping sound from each infiltrating the other's scene. So for example, visually, perhaps we have parents talking about their daughter's piano playing ability. We see them in conversation and they're just talking about this. And we hear piano music starting playing before the scene with the parents ends. Now visually, nobody's playing the piano. So where is that sound coming from? That sound is actually coming from the scene that is about to happen. So the scene coming up is actually going to be a scene of the daughter practicing. Visually, we go from parents talking about their daughter to visually seeing the daughter practice. In the audio track, while the first scene is going on and people are talking, we hear the piano practicing from the second scene. And then when we get to that second scene of seeing the daughter practice, we continue to hear some lingering conversation from the parents from the first scene. This is very similar to a hook, where we have a visual to visual hook, or we have an auditory to audio hook, that kind of thing. But when both scenes are kind of bleeding into each other, we technically have a sound bridge. And again, it lets us know that these two things are connected. We're not entering some sort of other plot line. This is the same plot line, and it lets us know they're all connected. Another example of a script tool is what we call the 180-degree rule. This quote-unquote rule comes into play when people are talking and we have dialogue going on. Basically, if two characters are talking, picture an imaginary line across which the camera may not pass. What is going to happen as a result is that when people are in conversation, even if we have 3 different cameras on them, the relationship of the characters on screen will stay the same. If a character starts on the left, they will always stay on the left of the screen. If the character is on the right, they will always stay on the right of the screen. And so you can see an example here that the green is where we would want the cameras to be. Those cameras can go anywhere they want on the green half of that dialogue setup. They could be looking over a shoulder from the blue character to the orange character. They could be in any way along that arc of 180 degrees. They could be at exactly 90 degrees. But in any way that they are there, as long as the camera stays on that side of the 180-degree line, then the characters will always stay in the same order. Orange will be on the left, blue will be on the right. That is following and adhering to the 180-degree rule. The challenge becomes if the camera somehow magically goes around that line, then you can see in the upper left-hand corner, somehow magically the characters would have flipped positions on screen. Now, for the most part, this isn't going to cause grand confusion because we're smart enough we can figure out that 2 people are talking, but it might be a little bit subtly confusing when characters seem to flip sides of the camera without actually walking around each other. But in essence, if the camera stays on one side, it is following the 180-degree rule. So for example, a scene from The Bourne Identity. Once they establish that Jason Bourne is on the right-hand side of the screen, the camera can stay anywhere in front of him. It cannot dance all the way around and put itself where that wall is behind them, because then Jason Bourne and the girl would be flipped on screen. Catching Fire, same thing. When we see Katniss over on the right, she can be there the entire time. The camera can move in that 180 degrees around her, but it cannot pass that invisible line and go more towards the party behind them, because then Katniss would have flipped to the left side of the screen. And so in summary, plots must progress. And screenwriters and directors have spent a lot of time in pre-production making sure that their plots make sense, that they are linked logically, that there's good cause and effect to move the plot forward. And so oftentimes they use these common tools, these script tools, to help move things along, to keep the characters moving, but also to keep dragging the audience along with them. They may use the time crunch, as in do this or else, or they might use the appointments, like, hey, see you tomorrow at the park, in order to connect the scenes. They could use the 4 types of hooks. They could use the very similar sound bridge, and they will definitely use the 180-degree rule to keep conversation clear, because no filmmaker wants their story to go ununderstood. And so any tools they can use, any grammar that they can infuse that is common and understood amongst audiences, they're going to do, because that's going to help their story be told more clearly. I think that's it. Thanks so much for listening. If you have any questions, please bring those into class and we'll get those answered. Otherwise, thanks, and we'll see you soon.